No, they are. All those details that you're talking about that spring from the EFAB design philosophy provides a significant level of detail. All your plans are significantly detailed.
We'll have to talk about that on the other side of the break. We're coming up on our third break now. This is Green Better Best on Voice America's Green Talk Network. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to Green Better Best. Rick, you still with me?
I am. I'm here, Bill.
I haven't lost you yet?
Negative. That's a negative, Ghost Rider.
All right, where do we leave off before the break?
I think we left off with, I was going to ask you for some examples of a balanced design, just so people can kind of understand. One of the ones I talked about, I read about is the Empire State Building. Talk a little bit about let's give an example of how this is a balanced design so that people can understand how to apply the principles, or clearly they don't understand how they were applied, not how to apply them. That's going to be something everyone's going to have to deal with on their own.
Yeah, that building, I'm particularly fond of the Empire State Building. Growing up in northern New Jersey, right across from New York City, seeing that building as a child, going up to the observation deck as a child and experiencing that building when I was very young, before I understood, what really went into creating something like that. So that's a significant building in my heart. The next part of that is, of course, the fact that, by bringing up the Empire State, obviously the Empire State Building was completed, in the early 30s, and that building was up well before, I started tinkering with, how should I do design. And
oh, really? Is that before you were? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, no, I wasn't born in the 30s. Thank goodness. But I guess my point is that these principles, the Econo-Functional Aesthetic Balance principles, can be applied to buildings already in existence to see how well they balance.
Sure.
If they balance at all. And, that balance means something different to every person. So,
well, clearly this building was economically balanced. This was built in the middle of the Depression.
Yes. Now, let's talk a little bit about the building itself. I believe the building to be very aesthetically pleasing. And, there's the art in the architecture. There's the aesthetics in the design. And, of course, you're dealing with a point in history where technology had reached a certain point where these heights were attainable. And, of course, someone embarked on the design to create the design in terms of the drawings and then the building process itself. The original building did not have the spire, the transmission antenna on it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about that as well. But the interesting thing to me about the Empire State Building, aside from its design and its function, is that it was created as the result of a real estate syndication during the Great Depression. Now, for our listeners who don't understand what a real estate syndication is a syndication is a way of raising capital in order to build something. You sell shares in the building, and then you amass the funds needed to then recognize and then build the building. During the Great Depression, obviously economic times were very tough. So a real estate syndication, to me, as an economic way to address the issue of trying to get the building up, is an incredibly creative solution to the problem. And it really, as I found out about this later on as I was studying the building, to me, that only enhanced the artistic value of the building. This building is not only beautiful and functional, but it also was beautiful as to how it was created, construction-wise and financing-wise. And to me, that is a great example of appropriate balance, that achieving that equilibrium, which creates a harmonious balance overall. Now, I said earlier that the transmission antenna was not part of the original design. In fact, if you watch King Kong, the original King Kong, the great King Kong, you'll notice that the transmission antenna is not part of the building as they made that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't because King Kong knocked it off. It was because it was added later as radio and television became the technology of the era. They needed a very high place from which to transmit, and of course New York is a broadcasting center, so they designed and added the spire, the transmission antenna, to the design, and the design accepted it beautifully and gracefully. Now, I suspect that there may have been discussions during the actual design of it earlier about putting a transmission antenna on it, but just in having those discussions even early on in the design to create a building that could accept such a thing afterwards, to me, again, is part of creating that harmonious balance. Now the building with the transmission antenna fulfills even a greater purpose, a greater function. It allowed the transmission of radio and television, throughout this entire area, and adding to the functions, adding to the aesthetic because of the shape of the spire, really, adding some beauty to the building, and the economic aspects of this. To me, that's the mark of great architecture.
Yeah, and now what you're trying to do is take these same principles and apply them to the residential industry. And some of the tips that we've come up with, some of the bases that you've discovered as part of the development of efab, and it's safe to say that the development of efab is not over. It's going to continue to evolve. The principles won't change, but I think how it's applied, I myself, and I know I've sent you emails, Bill, about how I believe it will advance itself, how it will believe it will evolve. But I think some of the design principles that we've talked about, over the past 11 shows that have come through. One of which is, clearly, one of the things I've said over and over again. That you probably wouldn't say it because you'd sound self-promoting, but an architect has to be part of the design phase for any green home. I mean, it's imperative to get somebody with the aesthetic aspect in a review of the form, the function of the house, based on what based on the home occupant's needs. You have to do that review. It's part of the process. Don't skip it. Another one is house size, Bill. Designing space for the sake of space. We could use that quotation again, but the reality is it's come up again and again. Size of the house.
Yeah. You're getting back to the sustainability issues and trying to, as you try to integrate green design technologies, sustainable technologies, they have an impact on the functions and on the aesthetics, of the home or building that you're trying to create. So, sustainability really dovetails perfectly into this approach. And the integrated design approach, as we experienced with the charrette for the LEED Platinum home that we designed, was incredibly productive 4 or 5 hour period where we had input from all the contractors and subcontractors, everything that affected the design, the construction logistics, the photovoltaics, the heating, air conditioning, the foundation systems, the waterproofing, water saving, all aspects of sustainability were factored in to create that overall harmonious balance that I talk about when I talk about this Econo-Functional Aesthetic Balance. And I hope people will use this. I mean, use this approach, use this way of thinking. I didn't create it just for me to use it, and I would hope that people would want to try to maybe change their way of thinking a little bit. Now,
I absolutely agree. I mean, I've used it myself as a lens to look at a decision. Does this balance? Are the economics, the function, and the aesthetics, are they balanced in this decision? And the overall thing I've come up with some of these things is I'm focused way too much on the green factor and things that people like aesthetically, such as windows. I probably should add more of a bill.
Well, you're passionate about it. In reality, there should be a balance between window and wall, between size of HVAC system and efficiency, and the amount of natural light that comes in. And when that balance is correct, you don't need artificial light inside. You can utilize the daylighting. So you're advancing green principles at the same time you're creating that aesthetic balance. And that's the harmony. That's the harmony of trying to think of things in these terms.
Yeah, that's the magic.
No, well, there's no real magic to it. It's about, in a lot of ways, it's about being sympathetic to the person who from an architect standpoint, it's about being sympathetic to the person who actually has to create this object.
Right, and I found it interesting that one of the statements that you make is that the building design should serve the people that utilize, not the people who design. It's an interesting point, and that's the one that hit me in the forehead and said, you know what, hey, you know, I'm designing it to get the green to be the greenest possible structure ever invented. But the reality is people have to live there, and they probably want a few more windows.
Right.
And again,
and the balance is the key. Now we're coming up on the end, Rick. So we should talk a little bit about the next show.
Sure.
Please join us for our next show, which I think we've decided, Rick. It's indoor air quality, a spotlight on the intangible, and we'll be discussing the essential balance that needs to be created to create good indoor air quality. There are a lot of factors: the tightness of construction, the filtration, the HVAC system, air exchangers, and such. We're going to be discussing that in some detail for people who are interested in that. So thanks for listening to Green Better Best on Voice America's Green Talk Network. We'll see you next week.
Please join us again for another edition of Green Better Best with your hosts, Bill Martin and Rick Goyette. We'll be back again next Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the Green Talk Network. This week, think when you build. Is it green, better, or best?